Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the lunch. I think I'm glad to see that not everybody sneaked into the fancy VTOL stuff all around the place, but that still a large portion of you is interested in the real business case of today, which is Rotorcraft, and so that's very good. And I would like to introduce you Daan Dousi from EASA Flight Standards, who is going to tell a bit more on flight simulation training devices. Daan, the floor is yours.
So thank you, David, for announcing it. I would like to have the presentation on screen, if that's possible, yeah. And do we have a presenter here? Yeah, okay. Good, so I'm just getting myself settled here. So just before I start the presentation, the focus you'll see is very much on airplanes, but that's not to say that it doesn't apply to helicopters. In fact, the same concept, the same principles, we will also transpose onto the helicopter domain in a follow-up phase. So let's have a look. So why are we here? We are here to present you the FSD capability concept, FCS. The name has changed over time. We started off with DNA, and then we talked about FAF, which can be confused with Final Approach Fix. So we ended up with FCS, but it's in fact, I want to explain to you a little bit later, it's more or less the DNA of a device. And it's all coming from the ICAO Doc 9625, which is the document dealing with simulator training devices. So we'll show you how the concept that we are going to present to you strengthens the link between training tasks and training tool, caters for new innovative training tools, enables better standardization of training tools used, and how we intend to amend the regulatory framework to enable the concept within Europe. So background, many of you will have seen that the paradigm in use, actually since the 1990s, maybe even earlier, is a focus on the high fidelity devices. So especially in the airplane domain, it's full flight simulators. I would say in the helicopter domain, probably the weight lies a bit more on the flight training devices. And of course, high fidelity comes at a cost, especially in those days. But this paradigm has been more or less in place here within our framework for a very, very long time. Also, the regulatory framework in terms of the training requirements is very prescriptive. It's mainly driven by ICAO, who also is quite prescriptive in this context, talking about what specific device needs to or can be used for specific licenses, for type ratings, etc., etc. So it is very restrictive, very prescriptive, inflexible, and it doesn't really help us with emerging technologies. So the new paradigm, or the aim of that, is to provide much more flexibility, much more access to other training devices, other innovative training devices. Not all the training devices that we're going to see under this are completely new, but at least we're going to enable more of them in the training, in contrast of just relying on the full flight sim high fidelity devices. So whilst maintaining the safety level, the objectives, I'm kind of repeating myself a little bit, is to reconnect and strengthen the connection between the training and the FSTD, enable tailored FSTDs to industry training needs, make use of all FSTD's individual capabilities, ensure FSTD qualification standardization by basing it on ICAO 9625, enable a new regulatory framework to better facilitate advancements, innovation in simulation technology, enable greater flexibility for training providers to provide more cost-effective training. So, just to give you a bit of background to the project, we have 3 phases in the project in a rulemaking task called 196. First phase was very much dedicated to the upset prevention recovery training priority that we had been working on also on the training side, but now we're at work package 2, which kind of commenced in 2017, mainly with FSTD experts. However, during an event in 2018, early 2018, it was called the use of FSTDs in training. There was a lot of requests from the audience, from the representatives from advisory bodies to say, look, you know, it needs to be also looked at much more from the training perspective. And at that moment in time, we fully agreed with them. And for that reason, we put up an EASA-led training task force in parallel to the large main FSTD expert group that started looking into really what are the training needs and how can we then make sure that the devices that are out there kind of fit with the training needs. Latest stakeholder feedback, meaning up until this point, we've been, of course, discussing this at various forums, and so far we've had quite positive feedback about the concept and what we're trying to achieve. So what is it that we're doing? So we already set the scene a little bit with opinion 05 and 06 in 2017, which will become applicable actually this month, as you can see, where we first looked at a quite limited scope where we felt that this is the easy part, also because ICAO is not so prescriptive in this area, and we believe this is where, where we can easily make an intervention and allow this concept to be tested and trialed to see if it will work, as we do believe it will work for all the other areas. So the follow-up for this then, to widen the scope, will be done under task 194. We commence this task sort of towards the end of this year, beginning of next year, and that will take some time, as rulemaking does take time generally. So in a nutshell, this is the proposal. So the concept, if you just look on the picture there, and I will go a bit deeper in that in a moment. You see the small excerpt there is actually an AMC level that is attached in future to the Appendix 9. Appendix 9 in the aircrew regulation in the Part FCL, which is the type rating requirements. And on the vertical side, you see all the training tasks like the V1 cut, the landing, things like that. And then on the top side, which is more or less on the horizontal, but then written in vertical, are the DNA features, let's say. And then inside the matrix, you'll have the different DNA levels. So you do an analysis as a training organization, you find the DNA, and then you look for a device, and that is the larger picture on the screen there. Look for a device that has this DNA. So you match them up, as simple as that, and then you have a perfect match and you can do good training in that device. So we make amendments to the CSF-STD airplanes first, based on those ICAO standards. We have to make a change to the implementing requirements because the FSD qualification certificate is today inside this in this regulation. And of course, to facilitate this whole package, we have to introduce AMC and GEM materials. So what does it mean then? So training provider makes an analysis of the tasks. Quite often, many of those tasks are actually written, of course, in the regulation itself, and then they determine the FCS, the DNA needed to achieve those tasks. You use the matrix I just described, and we believe that the matrix will be used by most training organizations, so we kind of do the work for you a little bit so you can use the matrix to identify the DNA. We also try to put a little bit of a process in there for tasks that have not been listed or new tasks, so that more mature organizations could actually do it themselves and come up with a DNA and a particular device thereafter. So this additional process, this methodology I was talking about. Then the training provider matches the DNA of the training need to the available devices out there, the DNAs of the device. And then the training provider puts all that into a nice package and presents that to the authority, who will then have to decide whether indeed this, this training need is adequately addressed with the device that is presented. So that's really the process in a nutshell. In fact, it's the same process today is already used for the approvals today, but it's not so specific and not so clear as this one. So what it comes down to then is today we are using the full flight sim as the device of choice, and we look at the device and see what can we do with it, and tomorrow then we look at the needs first, and then look out on the market to see what are the devices out there that can achieve those training needs. In terms of project planning, Q1 2020, we look for an MPA where we aim to consult the CSF-STD issue 3. We make the amendments to the FSD qualification certificate. We introduce the so-called equipment specification list. These are elements that are above and beyond the CSF-STD requirements and kind of given an added perspective of the particular device, some additional features that are not necessarily required by regulation. And then there's the AMC to the Appendix 9 to the matrix I mentioned. And then in quarter 2, we will see an opinion where we would present this change to the qualification certificate mainly to the Commission and the Member States. And all going well, knowing that this is a bit of a, the project started off in a different direction. We had to change direction. A lot of change management, lots of communications are needed here. And we foresee that the timeline here for implementation is also driven a little bit by the need for people to understand the concept, the need for the inspectors of the authority to understand what they have to do in terms of assessing the DNA of the devices, for the organizations using it. So there is time needed for everyone to understand how this concept will work. So ideally we do this much faster, but this is realism. This is realistic in what we've seen so far. So FSD is tailored to training needs. Why? Mismatch between the standards. So if you look at this picture, shows you the airplane side, and you can see there's 2 main devices that are being used today. The level D, 635 devices, and the FMPT level 2, 226. So these are the 2 we have, and nothing in between really that we can make use of. So this is the qualification certificate. You have at the top normally the qualification level, level C, level D, full flight sim, you have FTD, FMPT. And then we have this section here, and we always wonder, what is this section really telling us? So this section says at the top, it's guidance information for training, testing, and checking. So at the top here. So it's basically guidance only. And then there's a list of all sorts of items. Could these be training items? Can we list all the training items here? There's not enough space for it. And in fact, it's in rule level. We cannot really update it either because it's such a long process. So the question is, what is the purpose of this point as well? And the other thing is, okay, if it says yes, no, what does it mean? There's no AMCGM there to tell us how to interpret this. So it's kind of not really being used in a standardized way. And then on the other part, you see it's growing because we get more things, PBN items, things like that are not listed on the first part and actually have to be recorded in the other. So it's not really sufficient to make that demonstration to the authority to say, okay, this device can be used for these training objectives. So what you get is a situation where you have this qualification certificate and there's this mismatch between the Appendix 9, the training needs for the type rating, and the device itself. So it's unclear and it only benefits the highest fidelity devices. And hence, you will see in type rating training, and as I said already, most of the devices are full flight simulators in the airplane world. So what is the ICAO 9625 concept? This is the DNA, so 12 flight simulation features. For helicopters, in fact, it's 13 because they also add vibration and things like that. But we already look forward to the helicopters as well, so we make sure that the certificate that we change in the rule, we only have to do that once, so we make sure that there's 13 features there. But for the time being, for the airplanes, there will be 12, meaning aircraft, which are the more type-specific elements. Then there's the motion cues and the environment parts. Then you have the fidelity levels. You have the S for specific, highest level of fidelity. You have R for representative, G for generic, and N is basically the one that there is no feature. So if you look at how this would be translated, an FSTD is in future described like this. Features 1 to 12, and you have the specific DNA levels in there. So this is actually the full flight sim level D. So what are we going to change on the certificate? The lower part, this item we talked about guidance, we will remove and we'll replace it with this more or less along these lines. Still a few tweaks to be done, but you can see there's 13 features. So it's already incorporating the helicopters. And then you have this DNA possibility. So the FSTD inspectors will have to make an assessment on whether this is indeed the DNA of the device. So what we will see, this is kind of the process. So you see in the bottom left-hand corner is the matrix, the first point to look at. Then outcomes the DNA needed, you go back to the qualification certificate, which is the top left. You might look at the equipment specification list if you're looking for specific features that your device has, like a head-up display, for example. And all that together, you bring together and you present that for an approval of the course footprint, which is or ATO 135, adequacy of the FSD for training. Now, I should also note that this new concept is not going to be mandated as such. So if you are a training organization that thinks, okay, I don't want to make use of this and I want to stick to my devices that I have, I don't want to invest in anything else, you can do so. So it will not be mandatory. The only thing that will change is that during the natural revalidation of the simulator qualification certificate, it will be replaced and it will simply list the actual capability of your device, the DNA. So it's optional, but we do foresee that there will be some interest among training organizations. Future development ends, which is work package 3. So this is the CSFSD Rotorcraft initial issue. Should also become compliant with the FCS concept. Covers helicopters and VTOL. And it also enables requirements for introducing new innovative technologies, such as the one that Fabi will present in a moment from VR Motion. That should be also included in this. And also the other thing we're trying to address is the current one-size-fits-all approach in the FSD domain, where you have, as an FSD operator, requirement to comply, even if you have only one simulator, with quite a number of heavy regulations. So we're trying to also see if we can address that. And for the lower end of these simulators, the FMPTs, I would not say FTDs, but who knows, you would have a one-off qualification at the FSD manufacturer, let's say, and then after that you clone the device in a way, and you still have this qualification certificate with the DNA of the device listed on it. So there's no more need for initial qualifications every single time. So that should bring a lot of relief in this area. So I think to conclude then, the takeaways that EASA, the NEAs, and industry are working towards enabling this concept based on the ICAO 9625. We strengthen link between training task and training tool, cater for new innovative training tools, enable better standardization of training tools used, and we aim to go live for airplanes from 2021-22 with those training providers wishing to do so. As I mentioned, it's not going to be mandated and will be an alternative. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention, and I guess we do questions at the end of the session. Thank you.